for digoxin and AFib? It's like right on the slides.
1.8 to 1.1.
Thank you, yes, 0.8 to 1.1. Okay, so AFib, this is your values, okay? You gotta have this memorized. I think I definitely ask you this because it's a big deal. If we get it wrong in the hospital and it stresses me out, so it's a big deal, okay? All right, what is an appropriate total loading dose? Calculate for IV and PO, what'd you come up with? What'd you guys get for oral and then IV?
875.
Oral 875 micrograms.
Beautiful, and IV?
625 micrograms.
Brilliant. Thoughts or questions on how to get there? Straight plug and chug, right? Okay. I had a question about, do I have to have the equations memorized for the exam? I will tell you that I am a big believer as a student, a recent student. If it's on the slides, I will test on it unless I tell you that this is just because I want to tell you about something. So like I probably said like this picture of Van Gogh is not on the test, I just wanted to tell you about it. Like I usually make a big point if it's not on there. But I also will tell you that if you were to ask me right now to do the corrected phenytoin equation off the top of my head, I can't do it. So I try to be somewhat cognizant of that. So just keep that in mind. It's mostly going to be, it's less equations, but again, if it's on there, I would just look at it right before you come in or something, okay? So for the oral loading dose, how are you going to divide up these lovely tablets? What did you decide to do? First off, how do you generally do it? How much are you, what percentage are you trying to give? What's your goal in the first dose versus the second and so forth?
Is there anyone? Would you call it? Give half, then a fourth, then a fourth.
Yes, so half, 6 hours later, quarter, 6 hours later, quarter. How'd you guys do it for the tablets? What was your
3,
decision?
then 2, then 2. Or 4. Like 3, and then 2, then 2.
Yes,
So
so
like 7 tablets.
yeah, so 3, then 2, then 2. It brings you a little bit higher than 875. I think it's like closer to 1,000, which is reasonable. I think it's close. The other thing, I told you not to do it, and generally I think you shouldn't. I don't know if you've seen a digoxin tablet, they are really small. But you could potentially do 4 tablets and then 1.5, 1.5 for this as well. Again, in real life, there's a lot of ways to do it. I won't give you multiple answers on the test, so there'll be one that will be by and far and away the most logical answer, okay? In terms of being in range and not having something bizarre happening. What's an appropriate dosing scheme for administering the IV loading dose? What did you think made sense? Makes sense.
Milligrams and then 160 twice.
Sure, but I think that works. The way that I had it wrote down here was 375 times 1, followed by 125 times 2. Again, there's lots of ways to do this. It depends on what the vial size you have in front of you is, that kind of thing. But just kind of find something that seems relatively logical and go with that. Why do
Dr. Newsom?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you mind just going over again how you would split up the tablets throughout the day?
Yeah. So let me go up to my lovely blank sheet here. Seems to be the easiest way. So the way that I kind of looked at this was I looked at 875, and then I divided 875 divided by 2, and I was like 400, and I was like, that's a lovely thing right in the middle. And so I started thinking, okay, well, there's 125 microgram tablets. So my options are either to do 3 tablets and come up with 375, or I could do 4 tablets and come up with 500. Again, I tend to be just more critical care. I go with a bigger dose. So I was like, all right, I'll go with 4 tablets first off. So then I have 500. And then I said, okay, 875 was my total dose minus 500. That came out to be 375. So out of curiosity, I just divided that by 2, and it came out to 187. And I thought, oh, that's a tablet and a half, I believe. So doesn't that work out nicely? Again, some people do not do tablets and a half, and certainly I think that's a reasonable way to go. So some people may have done 500 followed by a tablet and a tablet. That would be a little low. Or you could do 500 followed by 2 tablets and 2 tablets. Again, that'd be a little bit higher. Those are all reasonable choices to get you close to a load. Does that kind of make sense? It really is just like you just sit there and like think about arithmetic and kind of divide it until it comes up to be something that looks nice. For you, since I don't have you design anything on the test, you can literally just add it up and decide what you think makes the most sense. I will try to give you things that are like tablet sizes, so you're going to see a lot of increments of 125, hopefully. And that's generally how you're going to see it done in the hospital as well. That's a good question. Hopefully it's a decent answer. All right. Why are loading doses for DIG? Why are we even talking about this? Why do you have to separate them?
Account for the distribution time.
It is distribution time. I agree with that. And there's something else if you were to slam someone all at once with 875.
Is it to prevent proarrhythmia?
Yes, yes. You can actually have proarrhythmias. It can also cause hypotension. Some people in particular are very sensitive to cardiac glycosides. They're extremely sensitive to digoxin. So you can see them have kind of an outsized effect to DIG, and you can see an arrhythmia in and of itself. So we kind of break it up. Let's see. All right. He got his first dose at 8 in the morning, followed by his next 2 doses at 2 and 8 p.m. When would you check the initial level? And why? Like in terms of number of hours later, your immediate gratification here. You want to know whether what you did, you spent all this time figuring out the perfect tablet size. You want to know if what you did worked, right?
We would do 6 hours after the last dose, so 2 a.m. at the earliest.
Yes. And so what I want you to realize is you can do 6 hours. That's 2 a.m. at the very earliest. That's the first time that level is meaningful to you. If it's any earlier, it hasn't distributed correctly yet, so not super meaningful. But we also will potentially do it 12 to 24 hours later and kind of time that with AM labs. So a lot of times if this happens, I come in the morning and they're like, we're going to do this, and I say, okay, and we set it up, and then I'm like, all right, just get levels tomorrow with AM labs, like 4 o'clock in the morning, 6 in the morning, something like that. But you're totally correct. Okay. All right. What's an appropriate maintenance dose for this guy? That you calculated.
We don't have that on our case.
Oh, you don't? That's always good. So I have it on mine, so we can talk about it. So, again, for AFib versus heart failure you can use that lovely Bauman method, the graph, which is great. You don't have to memorize the graph. I will give you the graph. But technically, if you're going to do maintenance dosing for digoxin, you would start with calculating creatinine clearance. Then you would do a percent daily loss, which is another set of equations. And then you would come up with an oral maintenance dose, which comes out in this guy to be 250, or actually technically 337 micrograms, so please don't give that because it's not a tablet size and it's just a lot of drone to give. So 250 would be the answer you would start. A little bit of clinical knowledge for you. Generally speaking, you should never see someone on anything over 250 in practice. If that were to happen, you should like immediately stop and ask the patient lots of questions and the physician lots of questions. If it turns out to be real, like take a picture of it because it's like gonna happen once in your life, and it'll be like you can like tell your friends like you would not believe this guy was on 500 a day or something. But it should be very weird for you. Okay, so 250 is the most. I actually had one of my favorite preceptors in residency was this guy named Ian. I think I actually used his initials earlier, IBH for phenatone. He's in here. So Ian told me that he's like, I'm 40 now and balding. And in my whole career, I've had like 5 people that are actually on 250 micrograms a day. And I was like, oh, okay. He's like, so anyway, anytime you see 250, you should always check and like look into the level and see if they actually should be on that. And then he's like, why do you think that is? And so we sat there and I thought about it and we talked about it for a little bit. And what it came to is that generally speaking, 250 means you're like a decently heavy person with good creatinine clearance. You're relatively young. So how many like healthy young people with good creatinine clearance are on digoxin? The answer is not many, right? So it's usually like sick, frail people. So that's why 125 is kind of the answer. But in this case, I think I just wanted to have some numbers so you guys could see it. So 250 it is. Okay. So the levels checked with AM labs, which were drawn at 4 in the morning. The level came back at 1.5. The team is now freaking out that the level is high. They want to hold the dose. What do you think? I want to know where your guys' maintenance dose question came from. That's so bizarre. So I printed this out off of what I gave you guys. So do you think it's really high?
No, so we wouldn't hold a dose.
Yes, this happens all the time. I'm not trying to trip you up. Like you walk in and you're like, good morning, you have your coffee, and like you wouldn't believe the dig level is 2. What do you think we should do? Do we need Digifab? Are we concerned? Should we skip the dose? Is the patient going to die? And you're like, when did you get this level? Oh, it was 2 hours after the last dose. You're like, no, it's fine. Like just we'll get a level tomorrow and we'll reassess. So this does happen all the time. So the level's a little bit high. You just loaded the patient 6 hours ago. It hasn't reached steady state. It hasn't equilibrated. You just go on your merry way. The next day, the team checks another level, and it's 1.1. Now the team is concerned the other direction that it's dropped so much. Are you going to increase the dose? Again, this is real life. So you're going to go up from your 250 a day, 375. I just gave you this whole story, so you're probably not. But tell me why you're not going to.
Would it be no because the drug has finally distributed out into the body, so it's at more of a steady state level?
Yes, beautiful. So we finally have the level we should have got yesterday in front of us. So this 1.1 that you're looking at is basically you patting yourself on the back saying you loaded the patient perfectly. It's distributed nicely. You should not mess with the maintenance dose of this patient until steady state. Okay? But again, the team sees a number and they're going to want to fix the number. It's going to be your job to help them clinically interpret the number and say it's okay, it's all good. We will continue as we were. Okay. So, given this, when would you check the level at steady state?
It'd be a week after the first dose.
Beautiful, yes. So how did you get there? I'm hoping that you're going to say he has good renal function, so your half-life is somewhere kind of in that 48-hour point, 3 to 5 half-lives, puts you in that 6 to 10 days. 7's a nice round number for us. Who wouldn't pick a week, right? So 7 days is a solid time to assess a steady state level. Again, you could decide to get a level at 5 days. And you can look at that, and if it's super high, you might decide that you're going to decrease the dose at the day 5 point, even though it's not a steady state, right? And if it looks like it's downright perfect, you might say, I guess I'll get one in a few more days just to really double check, but I'm probably in a good spot. But the textbook answer would be 3 to 5 half-lives, which in this guy, a week seems perfect. Okay. What electrolytes are you going to optimize? Hopefully I'm starting to sound like a broken record with electrolytes and arrhythmias. Yes, good. Potassium, magnesium, 4 and 2, right? Very nice. All right. Digoxin is given with other meds, 6 in the morning. A week later, the level is drawn at 8, and the level is 1.8. Is this useful to you? What are you going to do? 13. Or whoever. You need some time.
Is it that it wasn't a top level because it was too?
We said it wasn't a comparable because it was 2 hours after the other dose was given.
Perfect, yes. Okay, again, another thing that happens a lot in clinical practice, you get this high level, again, everyone's like, we should skip the dose, we're gonna DC it. You're like, this number is not meaningful to us. All right, now the dose, the level is drawn at 5 in the morning, which is basically AM labs. His last dose was given at 9 in the morning the day before. The level is 1. Is this good or bad? I'm hearing thumbs up here. Yes, it is good. Appropriate level. Okay, what is the digoxin level for BPM? He's got heart failure.
0.5 to 0.8.
Yes, 0.5 to 0.8. So again, heart failure trumps, okay? If you go over 0.5 to 0.8, you increase the risk of killing your patient with heart failure, okay? Like literally it puts them in the grave faster than if they had not been on the drug at all. So 0.5 to 0.8 is your magical number. All right. Yes.
I know that the potassium and the magnesium are right under goal, but since we're starting digoxin, would that raise flags to you right off the bat because it's so sensitive in this drug?
Yeah, I mean, in this, I admit, even though they look exact, like K of 3.9, NAG of 1.9 looks basically perfect to you, in real life, I would replace both of these patients. So I would probably give 20 of K and a couple grams of MAG and just make them be perfect for the next day. But yes, it's a good question. Okay. The patient, they get a DIG level. The DIG level is 0, and they're trying to decide they should give a loading dose. Do you think they should give a loading dose in this patient? I'm getting a thumbs down here. Yes, no, do not load this patient. Do not load the patient. And let's talk about why. Remember, loading somebody gets you immediate effects, instant gratification. Drug is in the system, you're providing immediate control. This is really good for things like VANC when you're treating sepsis, right? Really good for phenatone when you're treating status epilepticus. Really good for an active arrhythmia causing a problem. This guy does not have an active arrhythmia. He just needs stuff for his heart failure. It doesn't matter for us if it takes him a week to get there, all right? And they actually find that when you load patients with heart failure, because they're so sensitive, they tend to have worse outcomes. Don't load this patient. You got time. All right, you do your Baumann method. What's your maintenance dose for this guy? I'm hearing whispers of 125 here, yes. Hopefully if you look at the graph and you do something of creatinine clearance close to 70 and ideal body weight of around 87, you should kind of come into that 125 a day. And again, just like clinically speaking, that's a pretty normal dose that you would see, okay? And again, if you go through the math and you look at how this calculates compared to a general maintenance dose, it's literally half the dose, okay, compared to the original math. But this is because heart failure patients, they're a different breed, okay? They have poor perfusion to their kidneys, they have poor perfusions to their livers, they just don't process drugs as well, okay? So you get a lot of bang for your buck with these guys. So that's why Baumann method is considered safer, probably better for heart failure patients overall. Okay. Once again, what would be an appropriate time to get a DIG level for this guy? What do you think? Just pick some round numbers, right? 5, 7, 10, 14. What you gonna pick? How about group 17? What do you guys think?
said 24 hours.
So yeah, so you can't get a level in 24 hours. I don't disagree with that. But again, for steady state, probably not gonna be meaningful until closer to a week, right? So half-life, 2 to 4 days, 3 to 5 half-life, puts them straight at a week. So at the week point, the level's 1, 2. What's your recommendation? Stay the course, go to 14 days, see the true steady state level. Go up, go down, decrease. What are you gonna decrease to? Yeah, half it again. So every other day is a pretty standard option. Some people will do the half tablets. Again, if you're gonna give this old guy these half tablets, you better do it yourself. So I'm more of an every other day fan myself. Okay. The creatinine bumps from 1.5 to 1.9. Would you check a level, and what other questions might you ask? Are you concerned at all by this creatinine bump?
We checked the level because digoxin is eliminated clinically.
Yes. So the biggest assumption that we make with steady state, that we make with any equation, any drug, when we talk about steady state, anytime you see math associated with a drug, there is a key assumption. And the key assumption is constant renal function, the same renal function. If renal function is changing, it is literally impossible to be at steady state and impossible to make any decisions except for by levels, okay? So if you're ever in doubt, you can totally get a level. That's a very reasonable thing. So yes, in this guy with this bump, we will get a level the next day and kind of look at what else is he up to. So what's his BUN, what's his serum creatinine, ins and outs, electrolytes, how is he doing overall? Alrighty. So after a few months, he returns to clinic. He's now got his full heart failure shebang going on. He's got Coreg, ACE inhibitor, Lasix, amio, atorvastatin. What kind of drug interactions do you see, and what are you going to do? Are there a little bit of drug interactions going on, a lot of drug interactions? Are you concerned? Are you not concerned? How are you going to manage that?
A lot of drug interactions.
Yes, I agree. Do you think you can predict with your magic 8-ball how this is going to play out for him? I think that's a very wise thing to say, no. What do you think you're going to do, given that you have no clue how this is going to play out?
Can we get a level?
Yes, yes. Seriously, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. You don't know how this is going to go. So you've got Coreg, which is going to have a pharmacodynamic effect, maybe having more bradycardia. You've got lisinopril over here messing with your potassium. Now you've got potassium, digoxin playing together. That's always interesting. You've got Lasix, which is going to decrease your potassium, may cause some kidney dysfunction. Not sure how that's going to play out. So you've got something that's going to be increasing your DIG, but potentially the increase in decay is going to help your DIG, right? Because if you have higher K, it reduces what the DIG is up to. You've got amio, a little CYP3A4 to keep things interesting. You've got atorvastatin, maybe you need to decrease. You don't know, okay? There's no way to know, all right? So what would happen in a patient like this is you would be like, oh wow, they were started on a bunch of stuff and they're on DIG. We'll get a level and see, and then you go from there. So this guy, if he was on his every other day dose and it was high, he might become a 2 times a week player or a 3 times a week player. And if it's fine, then you say, huh, that's interesting. Every drug interaction here has played out to have a neutral effect. That's always fun to see. If it was low, that would be surprising, but I guess you could go up. Maybe you've done such a good job treating his heart failure, he has better kidney function than he did, right? We can always hope for that. All right, with your last 2 minutes of class, are there any questions or concerns about digoxin or phenytoin dosing that I can answer for you? Yes?
So you mentioned that the steady state would be at 7 days, but because it's in heart failure, would it be 10 days because the half-life increase?
Sure, yes. Always go further out for heart failure. I would agree with that. The way that this will play out in real life is that you're always going to kind of get it in that 7 to 10, and that's generally true of anyone. It's just kind of like what falls for a weekend, things like like that. But then the question becomes, can you interpret the value? Okay, and that's the question that's what I'm gonna try to get at on your exam. Awesome, thank you guys.